How's everybody doing? All righty. Aaron Paxton Arnold is a father, entrepreneur, keynote speaker, host, and national media contributor. He works to bring fresh and authentic perspectives to audiences, including platforms such as ESPN, MSNBC, VH1 and MTV, CNN, Forbes, and Essence. His contributions have tackled issues such as media portrayals of black men, gun violence in Chicago, police brutality, economic empowerment, and dispelling the myths about black fathers. Mr. Arnold currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and has spoken everywhere from Harvard to Capitol Hill. He has hosted and interviewed many game changers, from Fortune 500 CEOs to social activists. Mr. Arnold is a native of Chicago's South Side and a graduate of Florida A&M University. Among other honors, he was named one of 125 top alumni in the 125-year history of Florida A&M in 2012, and Black Enterprise recognized him as a distinguished man of color in 2015. His presentation today is Faith in God, a Black Man's Perspective. Please join us in welcoming Mr. Aaron Paxton Arnold.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Those bios are always, it feels so weird when somebody else is talking about you because it feels so pretentious. It's kind of like, let's just get to it, but thank you so much. But at the same token, it's always a reminder. I think just as human beings, we have a tendency to focus on what's next without reflecting on the past. And so every time I hear my bio being read, it's a reminder of really how blessed I've been. And how I never imagined even coming this way, coming this far. So I'm just really excited to be here. I kind of bucked the system a little bit. I didn't want to stand in front of the podium, if that's okay, because I felt like when you're doing it in front of a podium, it feels like you're giving a campaign speech or a keynote. And I really want today to be, very interactive. I had a great conversation or several conversations yesterday with several students, and so. I want to be as transparent as I can with you, as open as I can with you, because hopefully you guys will give me the same energy. So thank you for having me. So one of the things about faith in particular, and I was thinking about this last week, is I think when we start talking, like a lot of times we say, have faith, have faith, have faith, but like, what does that really mean? And so a lot of times we'll say, hey, you're in school, you're studying for your exams, I know you're stressed, but have faith. But it's become so generic now. Like, what does it really mean? And so for me, faith, there's another word that I always attach to that, and that's faith and commitment. And so, I always tell my daughter, a lot of people are passionate about a multitude of things, but very few will be committed. And so to me, faith represents when no matter what it is that you're aiming to do, whether it be personally, spiritually, socially, or what have you, that you are committed throughout that process. Because the process itself is challenging, the process itself is hard. I probably should have been homeless at least 2 or 3 times when I was living in New York and I started my second career. But I just had this unwavering belief in myself and in God that even if for some reason I did have to lose my apartment, that it was for a reason, but I didn't have to lose my apartment. Thank you, thank God. So as we kind of go through this process, I want you to really think about what faith means to you, beyond kind of maybe some of the generic and cliche ways that it's used. My faith stems from, and Jacob or Dr. Rue knows, growing up on the south side of Chicago. And when I turned 16, 18, 21, and 25, my dad would take me out. And he would always say, Aaron, you're 16, you beat the statistics as a black man coming from the south side of Chicago, 18, 21, and 25. And when I look at a lot of people that we grew up with, or just even if I look at the climate of Chicago now, it was kind of miraculous that I made it out for the most part unscathed. And I have to give all the credit, obviously, to God and then my parents, and in particular my dad, because it got to a point where and my mom and I, we talk about this. I was asked in an interview several years ago, like, remove your dad from the equation and where do you see yourself? And I was like, wow, I had never thought about that. And when I actually thought about it, I was like, I would be locked up or dead. More than likely, I would be dead. And what my dad represents to me and what he represented then is that I was more afraid of my dad than I was the gangbangers and the dope boys. And so it's like, and I still ended up getting into some trouble my senior year of high school, but that's just because I had a lot of time on my hands. I was arrogant, cocky, and I was fearless. But for the most part, I made it through unscathed, and it's a matter of, walking to Kenwood, walking to school, and people are trying to engage you and get you involved in certain things, but I'm like, look, man, I gotta go home, and I'll take my chances not getting engaged with you guys versus what I would have to deal with if I had to see my dad or he has to come get me. And honestly, I'll be transparent with you. My senior year, my last semester, I ended up getting arrested for just being stupid. And the worst feeling in the world was when my parents had to come get me, and I was chained up. My hands were chained, my feet were chained, basically kind of like a slave, it felt like. And I had no shoes on, and I couldn't look my parents in the eye. And the crazy thing about that day was, there's a sensitive side to me. So I had just placed third place in the state poetry contest, and my mom was at the mayor's office waiting for me because I was supposed to receive an award. Obviously, I did not show up. Why? Because I was in jail. So, again, when I think about faith and I bring those anecdotes up, there were so many situations in my life where I could have gone the wrong way, or the situation could have turned out the wrong way. But for whatever reason, God saw fit to give me a second chance, and then another second chance, and then another second chance, and then another second chance. Like, I've been very fortunate in my life where I've received favor and a multitude of second chances. So I do believe in second chances, because without those, there's no way I'm standing here today. As far as, growing up in Chicago and growing up as an African-American male, I remember my struggles started for me when I was in third grade. I don't know why I had anger issues. My mom said I had a tendency ever since I was in first grade to kind of put a lot of pressure on myself, which is what I do now as an adult. But I never really grasped at that age how to handle my emotions or handle my anger. And honestly, the dangerous part for me was that I was probably fearless. I wasn't afraid or scared of anything outside of my dad. And so that dictated a lot of the things that I did and how I responded to peers and other people while growing up. And when I got to sixth grade, things really started to kind of bear what bears fruit from the vantage point of, and you probably do not know this, but they tried to hold me back when I was in sixth grade. Not because of my grades, because my grades were good. I was testing at like 3 grade levels above, but one of my teachers basically said that I was crazy. So, at the time I'm transitioning to sixth grade, I don't really understand what's going on. And so they sent me to Michael Reese Hospital, which is in Chicago. It's not around anymore. And I had to go through a whole full day of psychiatric evaluations. And it's literally like what you see in the movies where they put the things on your chest and they hold the shapes up and they say, hey, like, what is this shape? What is this shape? And at the time I thought it was cool because I got free food and I didn't know any better. I got free food and I got a day out of school. And so a week and a half later, I remember those tests coming back, and it said that Aaron's a perfectly normal kid. And I remember my dad telling me at that point, he's like, Aaron, you need to get yourself together. That's not how he said it, but he's like, you need to get your stuff together because they're after you. And he was like, what you do from here on out affects you. And I later learned that a lot of my peers who looked like me were kind of put through the same thing. And the only thing that separated from me and my peers, and many of my peers who were African American, is that I had parents that were there to fight for me. So imagine, regardless of what my behavioral issues were, imagine you being a sixth grader, your grades are good, you're smart, but somebody comes and tells you that you're not good enough or you're not smart enough. That can become detrimental. And so the New York Times actually did an article on this several years ago. And as I started to get older and grow up and meet other African American men, I found out, I would find out this was a commonality across the board, regardless of what school they were at, what state, what city that they were in. And it wasn't until 8th grade, and I said this yesterday to some of the students, that I remember my dad telling me, and kind of what I was able to get my act together. He was like, Aaron, if you continue this behavior, 3 things will happen to you. He was like, 1, you'll get expelled from school, high school, which means you can't live here. He was like, 2, you'll get arrested, which means you can't live here. I ended up getting arrested anyway, but it was towards the latter part of my high school career, so I was on my way out anyway. But the third thing, and this is what kind of really struck me, he was like, they will kill you. And I was like, ooh, okay. And it was the first time that my dad kind of had that like man-to-man conversation with me. And how my dad grew up, he grew up in Chattanooga in, like the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where, racism was very blatant. My grandfather was kind of a stereotypical black man born in the 1920s. He was a provider, but kind of just really sexist. But he did what he was supposed to do for for my dad and my aunt. But, that was kind of, it didn't really show a lot of emotion. And so, I was afraid of my dad probably till about 16. But in that moment going into 8th grade, that moment kind of humanized my dad for me, because, he was really saying there's nothing that your mom and I can do. And I'm pleading that you get yourself together, because I don't want to lose you, right? And so as I got older, I began to understand that dynamic of having my dad around, and not just having my dad around, because I had other friends that were, some of my friends, African-American friends that had fathers, but they weren't necessarily as engaged or involved. I was in this group, or as my dad said, I was in this elitist group called Jack and Jill. And my dad hated it because he felt like, the black people that were in that group were just very elitist, but my mom grew up in it. My mom's kind of bougie, so that's why I was a part of it. And I remember, like, I would go over their houses, and they all had, like, bigger houses, and they got cars when they were, like, 12 or 13, like, nice cars, too. Like a car that I was just able to afford 10 years ago. And but what I started to realize is while their parents bought them things, they didn't really spend time with them. And so I really started to really gain an affinity for my dad and understand why he was the way, or why he is the way he is. And I also began to understand the challenges that I would face. And so everything that he told me that would happen, like, those aren't your friends, Dad, what do you know? Aaron, do this, don't do that. They kind of all came to fruition when I got arrested. And so, for me, as far as growing up as a African-American male in this country, or just from the south side of the city of Chicago, like partially, or a good part of the reason why I am the way I am is because of my dad and how he raised me and the example that he set. Like, a lot of times, it's kind of like what Maya Angelou said, and I'm paraphrasing it, but very few times will you remember verbatim everything that I say up here, but hopefully you will leave with a feeling that will carry your spirit on to the next day, to the next month, to the next year. And so by default, I was watching my dad. Like, my parents have been married for 48 years, and so I was watching my dad as a husband and as a father, and absorbing those things and those commonalities that I didn't even know. So part of the reason why I am the way I am today, and probably why I'm standing here, is just because, I grew up where I just want to help people. I want to dispel myths. My goal is always breaking down stereotypes. Like, I used to get offended when I got followed around in stores. I don't anymore. I just have fun with it sometimes. If I'm being followed, I just walk around until they keep walking around, to be honest with you. Because I also understand it's like you can get mad and upset with it, or it's all how you channel your energy, right? And I believe positive energy begets positive results. And so that's why one of the things that I've been passionate about is, like, dispelling the myths of black men, especially black fathers. And, every community has their issues, but I believe if you continue a narrative on any level that is negative, then you will continuously get negative results. If you focus on the things that are positive and you build around that, then eventually you will have, in my opinion, an overwhelming positive narrative. So yeah, that's just kind of how I am and why I am the way I am. Obviously, I have to give my mom credit too. She's pretty amazing. But when I got to college, I started to realize that having my dad, not just having my dad, but having him in my life was kind of an anomaly. Probably out of my friends that are close, only one of them has a relationship with his dad. So for me, it's just been very important that I dispel those myths. I have a daughter who's 17. I'll be frank with you, I went through a divorce 2 years ago. But, I've been very adamant in making sure that I break the cycle, because my ex-wife and even her mother didn't grow up with men around. And so I just believe that it is important for anybody to have a father figure or a mother figure around. And so that is just something that is, I continue to push. It is a narrative because I do what I do in media and on radio and so forth, that I have a platform in which I'm able to change minds. But also it's just about just being present. And being present in other people and volunteering in schools and allowing these kids to see that we exist, and the images that you see on Instagram or on the news aren't necessarily so. I used to work in the music business, and what changed that for me is I went to I went to an at-risk school and spoke to a bunch of fifth graders, and all the kids looked like me. And I asked them, like, what do you want to do when you get older? And all of the kids in there except one wanted to be either rappers or athletes. And so it broke my heart because while, we grew up with around, people that were gangbangers and dope boys or whatever, I also grew up around lawyers, doctors, engineers, and so forth. And so it broke my heart because I was like, these black kids and these black and brown kids, the only thing that they think that they can be that resembles success is that of rappers or athletes. And then so I had to kind of think and realize their home structure and how they were being raised. And so here I am slated to talk to these fifth graders about what I do in the music business, and I couldn't and I wouldn't because I didn't want to further perpetuate the stereotype that the only, again, thing that's successful as a black man that you can be is in that space. And so I changed the narrative. Like I asked them, like, if you could be, would you rather be an athlete making $10 million a year, or would you be the person paying $10 million a year? And of course, initially, the kids, like, they wanted to be the athletes making $10 million a year. But then I repurposed it, and I was like, well, if I can pay you $10 million a year on a bad day, I probably have $100 million in the bank. More than likely, I'm a billionaire. And so all the kids but one kid just wanted to be famous. But it just made me realize, like, you have to give our kids options. You have to show them the different narratives. Like, even if you love sports, there are the agents, the coaches, the athletic director. I mean, there's so many things that you could do within the space that you think that you're committed to. And I didn't feel good about what I was doing anymore as far as working in the music business. And so that was my second time starting over professionally. And so going back to having faith, I've always believed every time I started over in my career, or even in life, God was purging what was not meant for me so that I could receive what was meant for me. And so I also realized in that moment, just because I was good at something didn't mean I was walking in my purpose. Does that make sense? Because at the time, like, a lot of the accolades that he talked about, I had received while I was working in the music business. And I was like, man, I'm gonna have to give all of this up. But I just didn't feel good about what I was doing. And I truly believe that I've been put on this earth to educate, inspire, and entertain. And I put entertain last because I love being on radio and I love, hosting parties and events. But what's most important is being in venues like this and being able to have dialogues and exchanges with you all, because it's easy to receive entertainment, it's easy to be entertained, but after you leave that, what else do you do with the rest of your life, with the rest of your career, and so forth? So, again, for me, faith is just very important. I left an almost six-figure job when I was 24 to, bless you, to take an unpaid internship with Sean Diddy Combs. And the day after I got married, did not go on my honeymoon. And so, some people were like, man, it's crazy. And it was crazy. But, a lot of times, I always say there's never a perfect time to take a great opportunity, right? And that opportunity came at the most inopportune time. But I knew if I didn't take it, that I would probably never get that opportunity again. And so, again, it just goes back to having faith. Like, my whole life, personally and professionally, has been seated in faith, without a doubt. Because when I look back at it now, I'm like, man, I was kind of crazy for doing those or making those moves, or like, what was I thinking? Like, I didn't even know how I was going to eat the next month or what have you. But I always ate. I might have had the Eggo waffle diet for a couple months, but I always ate. I was never homeless, and I've always said God has always given me what I needed, never less and never any more. He's always given me what I needed so I can go execute and go after what I want. And so, with that being said, I would love to. I have a question for everybody, whoever is brave enough to answer. But like, as college students, what do you guys fear? Like, what do you guys worry about? What is like your greatest challenge? And then on top of that, I want to know how I can help, whether it's just spiritually, emotionally, or professionally. Like, I would love, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help. I'm not here to just deliver a lecture or whatever and then leave. Like, that's why I was here yesterday. I'm here till Friday. So I would like to know if there's a brave soul out there that's willing to be vulnerable.
We'd like you to speak in the microphone so we can capture it.
Oh, yeah, there's another microphone. Everybody in here's life is perfect. All right, great. I'm going to leave now. No, I'm joking. Yes, why not stand? And does everybody in here know her?
Oh, no.
Okay, so
no.
with that being said, just introduce yourself. And so look,
okay.
The reason why that's important to me is because It's not necessarily myself or your professors that will be the reason why you're successful. It's the people that you're growing with, right? And so, obviously you can't be best friends with everybody in this room, but you just never know where that next opportunity will come from. And it might just be simply from introducing yourself to me and somebody saying, I want to connect with you. So I always like for people to introduce themselves and just, say their name. And you don't have to get your social security or number or anything like that. Just talk.
Okay, my name's Rebecca. I'm from Norway. I'm studying psychology. I think definitely for me personally, but also a lot of people that I talk to, I think a really common thing in college is just like fear of the future.
Absolutely.
Like there's so many things that you can't control, and it's a really interesting time of life because there's so many possibilities. But
Right.
I don't know. I think like that balance of like having the faith to go forward and like not being paralyzed by fear. Like I think that's. I think it's kind of difficult at times. Like I'm coming towards the end of like graduation and. Right. Trying to figure out like law school and lots of different things and where to live, and so I just think fear of the future I think is a pretty general fear that we all have.
So I think that one that means you're human, because I go through that probably every month. The other part is, so maybe I'm just a little weird, like the unknown for me is exciting, because I remember when I got to my third PR agency and they had my whole basically 5-year career mapped out, and I looked at it, was like, this is it? Like, there has to be more, and because I'm just very ambitious. And so for me, I've always welcomed the unknown, and like I would never tell you to do something that I haven't done, or say, hey, walk by faith, or have faith and not have it if I haven't had it. But that just means that you care. It's okay to figure out, like, you're gonna be figuring out things for the rest of your life, right? You're gonna make mistakes. Like one of the narratives that was not pushed to me when I was in college is no one told me I would fail. And no one told me when I failed that it was okay to fail. Not to put anything on you, but you will fail at something. That's just the way that's the process. But you will make mistakes, but it's like, all right, I've made that mistake, now what do I do next? The other thing that I had to learn too is it's important to have that support group around you, because sometimes you will beat yourself up so much, and a lot of times once you realize there are other people that are going through the same thing that you're going through, you realize it's not you anymore. You realize it's just the process. And so that kind of leads me into like this, the whole mental wellness and protecting your spirit part of it. Like, again, it's okay. I truly believe it's okay for you to feel and be where you are right now. And next year you might want to make a change. It's your life. You can make changes every year. Like I worked for 4 global PR agencies in 5 years, and people told me not to do that, but I knew that what was right for me. And then I ended up leaving the whole industry completely, which is what was right for me. So I've just always, my dad would call me and be like, son, like, what are you doing? Like, you have that good job, and how are you gonna eat, and where are you, how are you gonna pay your rent? And I'm like, Dad, I don't know, but I know this is not for me. And I know there is something better out there for me, and I'm willing to, I have faith in myself and in God that I'm gonna put myself out there, and whatever happens will happen. If I'm not good at what I do, then it won't materialize, and I can always go back to what I was doing. But what is the greatest thing that can happen? I don't know. Like, I didn't come out of college saying I want to be a speaker or television, any of the things I've done. Like, I just thought I would be in public relations for the rest of my life, and I was cool with that. But then there's our plan, and then there's God's plan, right? And it took me a while to just accept, like, okay, I'm gonna just let go and give it up to God, because I was always trying to control it, and it was never working. Or I would chase, every time I've chased a check, I always found myself further back than what I would have if I had just stayed the course. So when I chased a check, those were moments where I lost faith. I lost faith in myself and in God. So now it's kind of like, I still have moments where I stress and I have anxiety, but for the most part, it's just like you just close your eyes, breathe, and get up in the morning and do what you need to do, and kind of just let the process take over and go from there. So I know you will be fine. I think if you weren't concerned or weren't addressing that, then something would be wrong, right? When I meet somebody and everybody's like, everything's perfect, I don't trust that person. I just don't. So thank you for being the first courageous soul to bare your soul. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'm just gonna say, so I guess I also have a fear of the future, but for a different reason. My fear is more I'm-
Name?
Oh, sorry. My name is Nathaniel Bird. I'm from Michigan.
Nice. Thank you so much.
I was going to say my fear is more, it's about moving forward in the world that we have left to us. You know, it's for college students, you know, when we get out of college, we have a lot of student loans to pay, and we're being blamed for a lot of the issues in the world today.
Right.
But in reality, we're taking over where it was left off.
Absolutely.
And so dealing with those kinds of things, you know, there's a lot of debt to be paid, and then the future of raising children in the world that we have today. Kind of the same concerns that, you know, your father had. Just raising black children, all those kinds of things that worry me a little bit.
Right. So one of those are very valid reasons and concerns. One, I think you have to realize you can only control what you can control, and so you have to do your part. You have to make sure that you do your part, not only for yourself and for your family, but so there's a book that my favorite book is called From Good to Great by Jim Collins, and I've always felt like, you know, what greatness is to me is not, I don't feel like people are born great. I feel like average people do great things every day. And because, bless you, in order to do those great things, that means that you're kind of taking the unbeaten path, right? And so I truly feel like if you're walking in your purpose, that not only will you be okay and your family be okay, but intentionally or unintentionally, what your work and your purpose will affect others in a positive way. And I feel like as long as you're doing that, you will be okay. You know, the student loans and the debt thing it's a valid concern, but my mom would always tell me, like, even rich people have to pay bills at some point. So you should never let that be a deterrent from whatever it is that you need to do. Like, I hear people say, like, I want to start a company or I want to do this, but I'm waiting to get funding or whatever. And I'm like, well, you'll be waiting all your life. Just start it and do it. Like, I feel like when people are waiting, again, that they don't have faith in themselves, and they don't have faith in the process, and they don't have faith in God. And it's not a bad thing. It's just fear. Fear can be paralyzing. You know, fear can be truly paralyzing. And I'm just telling you, like, there's no way. I mean, when I look at my career to this point in my life, like, there's just no way I should be standing here technically. But I'm standing here for a reason, and it is all seated in faith and just not wanting to be average. I had to tell this story. My mom said stop telling it, but I don't care. I don't think she's alive anymore. But I had a 4th grade teacher, Miss Goldenberg, who told me I wasn't smart enough to audition for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And so I remember I went home crying, and I remember my mom, like, pulling me back into the car when she went up to the school and slammed the door and, you know, probably said some things I can't repeat. And then, but I remember her coming out and her grabbing me by the collar and said, never allow anybody to dictate your self-worth. And so the reason why I bring that up is because for about 2 years, I still had that in the back of my mind that I was not smart enough to do something. And then we had one of our infamous Chicago teacher strikes. And my parents put me in a program at the Jewish Community Center in Hyde Park. And lo and behold, for the students, they were producing a play called The Pied Piper of Hamelin. So my counselor comes to me and he puts this, like, I mean, the script was like super big. And he's like, Aaron, I want you to audition for the lead role. And I remember I just, like, broke down crying because what Ms. Goldenberg said, regardless of what my mom said, because moms always tell you stuff like, baby, whatever, mom. But what Ms. Goldenberg told me was more prevalent than what my mother told me. And so I remember going home and telling my mom and dad, like, I can't do this. And I remember them telling me, you have to do it. So I learned my lines, I auditioned, I got the lead role. Fast forward, we did 2 shows. And that changed everything for me. And from that moment on, I said to myself that I never wanted to feel average again. I never wanted to feel inadequate again. And that's, you know, that is why I am the way I am. And it goes back to everything has a purpose. Like, for whatever reason, as a 4th grader, I was supposed to be told that I couldn't do it. And I was supposed to feel inadequate for those 2 years. And then I was supposed to overcome it and never want to feel that way again, and never quit or never just, you know, settle for just being good, but wanting to be great. And so as long as you never settle, you will be okay. And then it will be your job to come back to BYU and go other places around the world, in particular to show young African-American men and women, and even older African-American men and women, that it is very possible, that I come from where you come from, and it is still very much so possible. And as long as you do that, I feel like you'll be fine. Your kids will be fine. Your family will be fine. But you can't worry about, because there's so many things we can't control. So I think black men have like the highest rate of like hypertension and other issues. Part of it is just because we have enough stresses in the world. Walking out the house, being afraid of whatever is in front of us. So that's just something that you can't control. So, yes. Did I see somebody else's hand? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dalton Bradford. I study Middle East Studies, and
Pleasure to meet you.
this kind of goes back to what you were just saying about not being able to control everything.
Yes, sir.
But I think for some of us, we've been opened up in this generation to see just how much wrong is going on in
Yes,
the
sir.
world, and how much more privilege we might have than others, how much less others have compared to us.
Mm.
And just seeing there are people who don't even have a roof over their head, and
Right.
who are being denied safety in this country when they're fleeing for their lives. And
Right,
there's racism and gentrification in our own country that has still not been solved.
right.
So with so much that we're faced with, and us wanting to maybe like solve all the problems, how do you
Right.
settle, and how do you I guess find that space where you can be most effective in solving the problems that you're faced with?
I mean, again, you do what you can do for yourself. Like whatever your lane is, that's your lane. And I go to bed at night and wake up every morning knowing hopefully I've done my part. Like I can't solve what's going on over here, over there, but I can hopefully solve what's going on with whatever my space and area is, right? So your generation is like super dope. Like it's funny because I have a lot of my friends are younger, and I think you guys just kind of came into the world with that entrepreneurial spirit. And when I say entrepreneurial spirit, not necessarily meaning like starting a company, but like you guys are innovative, and in a lot of cases you guys are fearless. Like I had dinner with some students last night, and just hearing the things that they're starting or the organizations that they're leading. I cared about the world when I was in college, I think. I don't remember. But not to the extent that you guys do now. And I just find it extremely phenomenal to be, that you guys are so young, but to be so thoughtful. And part of that is because of kind of my parents' generation, but even our generation, like we've done, in a lot of cases, so much damage that it now gets put back on you guys. But you guys are fearless. You're like, look, I'm not going to accept what's happened over the last 20, 30 years. Like, we're going to make this change. We're going to hold companies accountable. We're going to take advantage of the digital and social space. And the other thing, too, which I think is pretty cool, when I was coming out of college, the narrative was like, you graduate, you get a job, you got 2.5 kids, you make as much money as you can, and you'll be happy. The 2.5 kids I'm still confused about, but whatever. But now it's just like, the focus is truly, I think, really on happiness. And I know for me, like, I remember when 9/11 happened, and I think it just kind of changed the mood of the country and the world to an extent where, like, people were like, okay, life is short. Like, it really lets you know how life is short, like, on a holistic level. And people started to really begin to focus on quality of life. And so, it's funny, when I was in my 20s and I was making, good money, that's when I was the most miserable. I'm not saying be broke either. Don't get it twisted. Let's not do that. But ultimately, like when I left all of that and I was doing something that I was passionate about and I was committed to, I had a ball. I forgot that I didn't have money. I forgot that I probably only ate once a day, whatever. Because it's like I'm growing. I know I'm doing something that's going to change my life, right? So you just have to find something that is fulfilling for you. And honestly, in a lot of cases, you have to figure out. You have to pick pockets in which you have to be selfish. I found myself giving so much to everyone else and everything else that I had nothing left for myself. And at one point, it literally almost killed me. I had a panic attack. And so you have to find moments. It could be prayer. It could be watching a basketball game, whatever it is. But you have to find moments where you're restoring your spirit and your energy. Like for me being here restores my spirit and my energy. So my dad always tells me, like, you have to put as many deposits in the bank because you will have to make withdrawals at some point. So you just want to make sure you're not overdrawn. So focus on what you're going to focus on. Know that you're doing your part. And it might just be something that's local. It might be something that's domestic. It might be something that's global. But whatever it's supposed to be will be because you're committed to it. And I truly believe it's coming from your heart. So that's it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Elaine. I'm studying sociocultural anthropology, and my question's really related to everything else we've been talking about. Just wondering how you find that place where you're okay with all the efforts that you've made, you're okay with what you're doing and yourself, how you reach that point or at least get there.
I'm not gonna give you the cliche answer. Honestly, it's so I'm not okay with it. So I'm contradicting myself, right? But it's easier to give you guys advice than it is to give me advice. I suffer from anxiety attacks, and they generally only happen when things are going really well, because now I know that I'm starting to get what I want, or I've gotten what I want, but that won't matter in a month to me. It won't matter in a year. And so I struggle with the balance of being thankful and grateful, but also understanding like that was last year, that was last month, like what are you gonna do next? And I think I've just been like that. I think that's kind of what pushes me, but it's a gift and a curse because it also can hinder me and be detrimental. And so even right now, I'm still learning how to balance it all. But at the same token, I hate to keep bringing up my dad, goodness, but he always tells me like if you put your problems in the middle of the table, you will always take yours back. And so I realize every day how fortunate I am, how blessed I am. If I probably told you the things I was probably stressed about, you guys are like, oh, Aaron's spoiled. You know, Aaron truly has first world issues, you know, that type of stuff. But it's just me wanting to continue to help people, me wanting to continue to serve, me wanting to continue to maybe if I do things that are great and change people's lives. Like I can't take money with me, but I've been blessed that, you know, I've had students tweet me over the last 10 years and literally students saying that I saved their lives in some instances. Students were like on the verge of suicide. Like that's my legacy. Like no check, because checks will come and go. No amount of money can replace that feeling and knowing that I'm again walking in my purpose and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So I encourage everybody here to be ambitious, everybody to, you know, strive for greatness and so forth. But, you know, also, the fact that you guys are in this room today, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people that aren't here for whatever reason. There are thousands of people that applied to get into this school that did not get accepted for whatever reason, and you guys are here. So, it's an accomplishment, right? You're thankful for it, but then you don't rest on it. It's like, all right, now I'm here. Now what do I do next? And so I just think it's a balance that you have to, I think it's okay to pat yourself on the back and say, hey, good job. But at the same token, you have to do it with humility, if that makes sense. And you will be fine. All of this stuff is like, again, I was not prepared for, like, no one told me any of these things coming out of college. So it was kind of like a crash course for me. But you know how Charles Darwin says necessity is the mother of invention. Like for me, I just have a necessity to want to be happy. And so I refuse to be miserable. I'm sure we all have friends, family members that are just complainers, miserable, and miserable people love other miserable people. They try to just bring you in. And so it takes a lot of, it's easy to be miserable, and it takes a lot of hard work to be happy. And I think part of that is balance and knowing that you're doing, like even you being here today, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Now what you do after that is up to you, and you want to keep growing, but there's no doubt in my mind that you're here for a reason and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, because you could be anywhere else in the world doing nothing. So obviously you want to be here and you want to contribute. And that's why I like coming to colleges and universities, because everybody in this room, I hope, believes that they can change the world. And you can. Like, never lose that level of naivety, because as we get older, as we become adults, a lot of us tend to become bitter or jaded, based off experiences that we face. And I encourage even people that are my age, like, if there's something that you want to do, like my mom started law school at 42, and she just retired last month. So, it's just do what you want to do, and always have that feeling that you have now. Like, always remember this feeling that you have now, not the feeling of being stressed over finals, because I know I've talked to some people, but just always have that feeling of optimism and knowing that you could do better and that you will do better and you are actually helping people. So, yes, sir.
Thanks. When I saw that you were coming, I was reading about your bio, and I read this op-ed that you did for CNN about black fathers in America,
Yes,
and
sir.
I appreciated what you said about banishing popular misunderstandings,
Yes, sir.
and about how positivity begets positivity.
Right.
And I wanted to ask if there were any other myths related to your upbringing that you wish more people understood.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, even it's funny. Like I remember, well, I separate the two, but I remember like shows like the Cosby Show in a Different World, and all the criticism that came at that show, like that's not reality and so forth. And even in the piece I wrote, the Black Fathers piece, I used my block in my subdivision as an antidote. Like we were all black fathers, everybody was under 40, everybody was married. And when I wrote that article, I had people tweet me and say that that's not true, it doesn't exist. I'm like, how can you tell me about my neighborhood? How can you tell me about my life? But the other thing, I had black men from all over the country thanking me. I just did an interview off that article 2 weeks ago, and that was published in 2015, because there were a lot of black men that thought that they were just alone. Like they didn't know that there were other black men out there that were, taking care of their kids and doing what they were supposed to be doing. And it's so funny because a lot of that article was predicated off the CDC study. But even still, like people, and not white people, but a lot of black people, a lot of black women, a lot of people were like, well, that's not true, or that's just your reality, or what have you. And I understand why it might not be a reality for everybody, but again, I mean, how many years, how many more times are we gonna push the narrative that black men and black fathers don't exist, when what I see is quite the opposite. I see the other side too, but I just choose to focus on the other part because I've been like historically in this country, when it comes to the black family, like the first thing that's been taken away from our families has been black men. Even since the days of slavery, like that was always the way to disenfranchise our families and the foundation. So, it's just something that I take really serious. I've been in corporate America and been the only black person, black guy. I'm not the first. I haven't been the last, and I've gone through things where I always say that the people that I work with, they weren't racist, but their perception of who I was supposed to be was seated in racism. My first review that I ever received that came back to me, they used the word disgruntled. Like that's a powerful word to put on any human being. Like that's somebody that is prepared to maybe go postal or something like that. Like that is a very powerful word, but it's like if I disagree with something, Aaron is disgruntled. Oh, wait a minute, So then I was like, all right, well, I just won't say anything. And then it was like, Aaron is non-participatory. So it's like, what do we do? And a lot of that, I was working with people that had never been around black men outside of athletes at their schools. And so here's Aaron, I have two parents and, all that good stuff. And they just didn't understand it. And so a lot of that is just about, and the reason why I'm excited to be here is because a lot of that is just about exposing yourself culturally to different people. Like my daughter's 17 now, and I will be honest, I was never really sensitive to gender equality issues until she became a freshman in high school. And I said this story yesterday because I looked at the boys' baseball field and I looked at the softball field. And I'm like, the boys are terrible, but they're afforded more amenities. And so I waited till my daughter became a senior this year, and I became vice president of Booster Club, and I literally fought with the administration to make sure like they got what they were supposed to get, because I'm like, it's unacceptable. And so I realized in that moment that obviously I'm not a woman, but you don't have to be a woman to channel other people's causes. And so that's just something that I'm very passionate about, because in 5 years, my daughter will possibly hit the workforce. And I want to make sure, going back to doing my part, I want to make sure that I do my part to make sure that equality gap is closed. I mean, I know it won't be closed 100% unless something miraculous happens, but if I could do my part and everybody else can do their part, it will make a difference, right? So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Stand up, right? Yeah.
Stand
okay.
up, please.
My name's Eliza. I'm a sociology major. So I kind of have a little bit more of a personal question for you. So in my preparation to come here today and listen to you, I saw a YouTube video that you made. It was titled, it was titled, Why God's Plan for You is for You.
Right.
Okay, so you probably remember that.
I was like, uh-oh.
What advice would you give to someone who is afraid that that is not the case? Or how did you get to that place where you can really trust in that?
Thank you for asking that question. It's so about 5 years ago, I have a mentor, and this is, I mean, I don't know how many of people in this room have mentors, but just find good mentors. I mean, I have like probably over 100 mentors. Like there's just, some are younger, some are older. You know, even my daughter's my mentor. Like she's just like really insightful with certain things. But I had a mentor, and we were talking and on the phone, and he stopped me and he said, Aaron, and this is when I was still in the music space, and he was like, Aaron, I don't know what you want to be as you get older, but he was like, what you're doing now is not your purpose. And he was like, just listening to you talk, I know that's not your purpose. And he was like, when you discover that, when you have that moment, that uncomfortable moment, because it will be uncomfortable, don't fight it. Listen to what God is telling you and go from there. And so it's a very uncomfortable feeling because a lot of times like we pray and we ask God for answers, but God gives us a different answer than we expected. And it's like, uh-oh. But, you know, when God wants you to grow, God makes you uncomfortable. And so I'm really weird. Like I watch like nature channels, National Geographic, History Channel and stuff like that because I believe in processes, right? And so Will Smith did this thing on Netflix. I can't remember what it was, but one of the episodes was about how we receive oxygen. And how we receive oxygen in the United States happens all the way over in Africa, then goes from the Amazon and then goes back, and then somehow we get oxygen. I'm completely butchering the process right now, but you get the point. And so in that moment, it's like this little thing called a diatom. Like we can't even see it, but it's a little thing called a diatom, which is the reason why we're breathing currently today. And I was like, wow, like this planet is so amazing that God has made a purpose for every single little thing, from big to small. And if there's this little thing called a diatom that we'll never see, that is responsible for us breathing, then what do you think God has put us on this planet and Earth for? And so that's why I did that to begin with. But it's hard because like we all have our own vision of what we want to be, our own image of ourselves. And sometimes, I mean, look, you know, I know I'm short, but, you know, I thought I was good enough to play in the NBA, you know. But that wasn't my plan, you know. So I was like, okay, Aaron, you're not going to be doing that, so what else do you want to do? What else can you do? I actually got accepted into college as a chemical engineering major. I was taking AP chemistry, was getting it. I was like, okay. And at the time, that was kind of like the hot major. People were making good money. And fortunately for me, I did an internship at the Illinois Institute of Technology. And it was bad. Like, I mean, I was getting paid like $25 an hour, but I was in the lab for 12 hours a day. I had allergies. So I remember going home, and my dad was like, son, you're going to die if you stay there, basically. And I was like, Dad, but I mean, I made more money in a month than I had made in 4 years working at the grocery store. And my dad was like, well, son, like, you're just not going to make it. And he's like, so I think it's okay this time to quit. And so he was like, but you always have been a good writer. Like, you like to write. I had been writing for our high school newspaper. I had been published in the Tribune by then. And so he was like, don't focus on the money, focus on what you're good at. And I realized I was really good at writing, so I changed my whole trajectory, and that's when I decided to major in journalism. And so, again, there are moments in your life where, and it was kind of hard, because, like, again, chemical engineering was just the major that everybody was telling me and pushing me to go through. But I had a reality check that this is not where I need to be right now. So even if I hadn't figured out it was journalism, even if I wasn't good at writing at the time, I knew that it was a harsh reality that I was not going to be a chemical engineer. And again, it just goes back. And I'm not going to say like I practiced faith in high school or I had faith. I kind of just floated, and by the grace of God, I made it. But again, when I look at my life and I look at my journey, I've always been put in situations where I've just been fearless. Like, I've never been afraid to start over. I've never been afraid if I fail to get back up. I think humility is a big thing. I've been fortunate enough, I've been very blessed enough that I've made some big mistakes, and I've been able to learn from those mistakes, and they did not hinder me like they hindered some of my other peers for whatever reason. So you kind of just have to dig in. And that's like, even while you guys are in school, like, that's important of doing internships and, you know, just exploring while you're in school. Like, for me, college was just as important for me figuring out what I don't want to be, what I don't want to do, just as much as me figuring out what I do want to be, like, my first internship was at a newspaper in Bay City, Michigan, and I'm not gonna lie, I hated it. It was great for experience, but I hated it because I didn't like going to someone's house after their child has been killed in a car accident and asking them, how do you feel? But that's your job as a newspaper journalist. And I was like, nope, this is not for me. Plus, the people in the newsroom couldn't dress. I was like, whatever, can't do that. And it's like, come on, let me switch over to like public relations, where everybody's kind of fresh. But again, it was through that experience where I realized this is not something I want to do for the rest of my life. And so I just adjusted accordingly. I actually lost one of my scholarships because of it. But, you know, I've never, you can't buy me with money. Like, I've never made a decision based off money. So, and I'm here. So, yeah. Thank you for that question.
Boy, no one's left. This is great.
A couple
But we
people
know a
snuck
lot of students will have to leave for class, so why don't we just take this moment, thank Aaron for this great hour.
Thank you.